Hello, hello, RobinWood here, and we're going to be looking at the computer build that I just did. I'm just going to talk over this clip, and I have my wife Bailey with me,
Hello, hello.
and I'm going to talk about the process that we went through to make the computer, some of the areas that maybe weren't going as smoothly as others, and in general, how long it ultimately took to get it up and running. First thing I should say is this isn't my first computer build. I've built my own computer about 10 years ago, and then I built my wife's computer about 6 or 7 years ago. And so I'm not new to this, but the components have obviously changed quite a bit since that has happened. Um,
Don't eat my plant.
I don't know that I found it more difficult, but on a technical standpoint, the storage and ooh, did you see my like and subscribe? I just put that in. I've been messing with Adobe Premiere Pro, which is actually why I built this computer so that I could run some of the higher end video editing things. And so that was my trial. I've only been running Adobe for probably, what do you think, a week? Maybe a week, Bailey?
If that, for
Yeah.
like a few days.
Yeah, just a few days. Yes, well, since essentially I couldn't run it very well on my old computer from a decade ago, up until I built this last night or the night before. Um, so there's the motherboard, and the motherboard is an ASUS ROG Strix. It's the Z90, and I believe that was the gaming one, if I recall, with the 6E Wi-Fi. So right now I was just checking to make sure because I bought a mid-size tower, not a full-size tower. In the past, I always got full-size towers, and I think as technology has improved a lot, I used to have to run SATA drives and really big storage units, plus CD drives and things like that. But nowadays, everything's Bluetooth, and the storage is, a small chip rather than in a solid state drive. So I thought a mid-sized tower would work well, and it seemed to. So I was just checking the fitting of that. Here we're looking at the power supply, and I went with a 750 watt ATX 80 plus gold certified full modular power. It's the Corsair brand. I don't think ultimately it matters on brand, but it does to an extent matter what grade you're getting, whether that's a bronze or a gold or a platinum, or I think there's a titanium as well. As far as efficiency and how long it's going to hold up, and certain manufacturers are definitely more reputable than others, but I went with Corsair and currently no problems. I'm trying to think what I ran in the past. I think in the past I might have ran Corsair as well. And here I am. Oh no, you know what? I ran Eva for a while on one of my old builds, and that one held up really well on the power supply, and I believe it was a 750 watt as well. Bailey's wondering why she's here. She's starting to question why I needed her to be involved, but I thought it'd be fun.
So far, the only comment I wanted to make just now was Eva.
Eva, Wally. Uh,
um,
So here we are. This is just the backside on the motherboard or the tower, the mid-sized tower. And I guess I should tell you what tower I got because it was dirt cheap. A lot of times when I buy these towers in the past, they're like $200 to $300, which if you're trying to make a really nice computer, they get pretty pricey. This particular computer is running a little over probably like $2,100 to $2,200, and I got this mid-sized tower from Newegg for $59, and it was on sale. And it's a Rosewill Prism S500 ATX mid tower. It comes with three LED fans on the bottom, LED strip light that's around the front that goes around the entire case. And then I think it has a back LED as well, like the exhaust fan area right below actually where I'm at on the video, putting in the power supply. Right below there, there's a RGB LED. So now let's see. It looks like we're going to take a look inside, up my nose, and then back at the motherboard. So inside of the motherboard, and this is actually, you can see here, I didn't install any small SSD drives or anything like that, but it has all these little spots where you can connect them. And like I said, back in the day, 10 years ago when I was building these, I had to get full-size towers because I was having 6 hard drives and a Blu-ray player and all those things, and they all required a lot of space. Now just taking the motherboard, making sure that I can squeeze it in here. The problem I ran into, I actually took off that back fan on the back of the case so that I could get this onto the prongs. So there you can see I pulled it out. And now I can slide the motherboard easily to the brass, or I think they're brass, the brass prongs for the motherboard to rest on. I just didn't want to force anything through there with the fan in between, just in case it rubbed something on the back of the motherboard and caused a problem, which unfortunately I did have that happen in the past. Also keep in mind, if you're attaching a motherboard to a tower and you've taken off that back side, so I have this laying on its, on its back, there is an exposure right behind where the CPU would go. So just don't have any screws or like screwdrivers or anything that you set your tower on, because if it presses on the back of your motherboard, you could end up with a faulty board that you're going to have to turn back in. I believe Newegg has like a 30-day policy or something like that, but they're probably going to charge you something because it's definitely a user error. So now here we are, just going through and installing the screws for the motherboard. There's 9 case screws that go into this. Pretty simple. I used a small, and I used to get wary about using magnetic tools with computer components, but I mean with these little tiny screws, it's so annoying if they keep falling out of your screwdriver. So I just used a magnetic screwdriver. It would be nice if you had a thinner one with a long shaft to it. That way you could get down into some of these nooks and crannies more easily than what I did. I just didn't have my other screwdriver, otherwise I probably would have did that. And yeah, once that's installed, so now we're looking over here. This is what is this? Oh, okay, this is the Samsung 980 Pro M.2 2280 2TB PCIe Generation 4 NVMe. This is kind of what I was talking about space saving. Back in the day, 500 gigabytes was a 1.5 by 6 inches by 4 inches disk drive that took up a ton of space. And this one now, I can just take it, and it's the size of, it's probably an inch, and it might be an inch and a quarter wide. There, here we go. Maybe 3 inches long, if I'm just guessing. And on this particular motherboard, I ended up I put it in the wrong spot, and I realized that later after, of course, I put everything in the way. So you'll watch as I maybe have to remove it. I can't remember if I kept that in the cuttings, but they install just like that. You take off the little heat shield. If you had the difference is this was a PCIe 4.0, and the spot I put it in is a 5.0 on this particular motherboard. Oh, and this little heat tab kept breaking on me. It was a pain in the rear. So after I fiddled with this, which hopefully we're not going to watch all of it, and got that down there, if you did have a 5.0, this would work just fine. And I probably will get a 5.0 just because we're going to have a lot of data on this computer. But for now, I stuck with the 4.0. I'll, install this. That was relatively easy. It's just 2 case screws, and this heatsink just plugs and play. And then anchor it back down. And I don't know if I filmed. The other spot is actually right below where we're at now. So you can see that's the CPU spot right there. And then right below it is another one of these sort of heatsink bars. And you can see it there. Yeah, just that gray one. Okay. Now we're on to the graphics card, and this is an MSI Ventus GeForce RTX 3060 12 gigabyte, and it's GDDR6 4.0. This one's pretty good. On the back, I think we're gonna take a look. I always like it's kind of funny to me. You know, you see cars on the road and they're all covered in like bumper stickers, and they're like, "Oh my God, I love my exhaust," or "I love whatever," and it's like souped up and all these decals. I just assume that computer companies must run these because you get so much bling anytime you buy a MSI, like a graphics card or a tower, and I'm thinking to myself, they just want me to like cover up the clear shield with this. I don't know. I never put them anywhere, but they look like they're pretty expensive. So hopefully I'm not paying extra for all the decals because I'm definitely not using them. This is also a pretty easy plug and play on this particular motherboard. Once we go back inside, that you'll see there's a quick release button, and that's where I mount this particular graphics card. So that makes it super simple. And just pulling off the protective tabs for that. And have I showed, we'll see. I can't remember if I show close to the camera to show how many drives it has. Maybe I already did that and missed it, but maybe we'll see it here. This particular graphics card has 3 display ports and 1 HDMI. And you just line it up, take out your little back brackets. I actually took out the wrong ones. I thought it was going to go to the top 2, and it actually goes to the second and third. So I'm going to remove that real quickly, and then we are good to go. And bada bing, bada boom, and it's done. And then you just got to add your screws so that it's stable. This did come with an anchor to support, just because the graphics cards are pretty big, and I think if somebody's tower moves a lot, or maybe if you live in California and you get earthquakes routinely, there is an anchor now that holds up a portion of the graphics card so you don't get too much movement. Here comes the Intel chip. Do you see how fancy that was with that gold casing and the box design?
I feel like it'd be cooler if you just put the gold casing in there.
Oh, I know, right? Well, so we'll take a look. I mean, there's plenty of gold in this thing, so. This is the Alder Lake Intel Core i9 12900K. It's a 12th generation. It has 16 cores, 3.2 gigahertz LGA 1700. This specific 690, oh yeah, here on the video, make sure you remove that little plastic tab. I'm just checking because I was being dumb and I forgot to remove it. This does take a little force on this latch, so don't be afraid if you're like, oh, there's a lot of tension on this. It's built that way. Nothing, no issues with that. And then this is the heat sink for the CPU. I was really concerned this wasn't going to fit in my case. It was enormous, and in hindsight, this was a big mess up as far as time and annoyance. I should definitely have went through and attached all the wires, because trying to attach the wires once I put this monstrosity in there was crazy. Plus, the CPU cooler, it's, you know, there's so many thin pieces of metal that make up the sides of that, so you can kind of see it there. And they're really sharp, so every time I was reaching in there and trying to screw things in place, I kept kind of like nicking my finger. And that is super irritating, but it also comes with 2 fans. I'd never installed the second fan. I think I'm going to have to modify it for this particular tower to get it to fit, honestly. It's just a little big. So here's the back side, and this is the mounting bracket that you need to install to bracket this particular one. It tells you all through the manual, you know, there's 3 slots and 3, 2, 1 as far as the screw sets, and it just talks you through it. And then on the other side, I'm going to put some spacers that are plastic, and then screw those down, and that'll hold 2 metal brackets on the front of the motherboard, and those two metal brackets then are what the CPU heatsink will attach to. And while that happens, Bailey, do you have anything interesting? It's actually my wife's birthday today, and so I'm making her do this, which I'm sure she's really excited about. But
happy birthday.
Yeah, happy
to
birthday
me.
to her. But we're going to go out to eat here in a little bit. Her parents are coming up, so that should be fun. Probably more interesting than this this read. Oh, look at that. Like and subscribe. That is perfect timing. I really think that transition's turning out pretty good.
It is quite nice. I will say too, I guess I should apologize because if any of you were getting motion sick during all the cameraing, that was my fault.
Some of it. Some of it's me.
Oh, that was his fault, but a few of those were me.
Oh, these are those metal brackets I was talking about. And you just make sure you orient them the right way, but it talks you all through it.
Oh, this is my cameraing.
Oh, you're doing this? Oh, wow. This is nice. Wow.
I was
Happy birthday to her, right?
I was trying to get straight up and down. I thought that was
better. I think this is good. Plus, look at that MSI GeForce. Like, really just, it's coming at you. Oh, another thing is before you put your, like I said, monstrosity of a heatsink in, definitely pull off all the little stickers. That also was annoying. Anything that had the little protective plastic coating to reach back in and try to remove those just wasted a lot of time. But like I say, building the computer so far, just, watching this back, some of these things, yeah, I'm looking up and this is sped up, but relatively easy. This is the sort of like batter that they send with the cooling that helps distribute the heat from the CPU into the heatsink and vice versa. You'll see there's a specific way to do it. For the LGA 1700, which this motherboard specifically made for, it suggests this 5-star pattern with a larger glob in the middle. And here comes another mess up. I was like, oh yeah, I got way ahead of myself. I was doing great. I was installing things. This always happens. And then I looked at the orientation as I'm like screwing these in, and I'm thinking, so everything's going to vent to the left, and now I've oriented my vent up and down. Needless to say, I do go back and redo this, which required me to move those metal brackets that I showed, re-screw it all in, play around and nick my fingers some more. Luckily, it did come with this screwdriver that has a long shank to it.
I had something to say.
Oh, you go right ahead. Talk when you want.
If you would have wanted a good cameraing moment, when you were lowering down what's the silver thing called?
Which silver thing?
The big silver thing. It looks like a grill. It reminded me of
Oh,
Frank's
yeah.
Lightning.
So that's actually, this picture is that. So that's the grill from the side angle. And what we're looking at is the DDR5 ports for this, which I think this motherboard might be able to accept DDR4 as well. And speaking of which, the DDR5 that I am installing currently in this is the G-Skill Trident Z5 RGB series, 32 gigabytes, each one 16. It's 288 pin, and I have it running at 6400, which I had to go through and manually set in the BIOS and set XMP. You have to turn that on, otherwise essentially it won't run at that speed. The motherboard will choose an optimal speed. Oh, and here's a mess up. So you should always read the manual. In the old days, I could have sworn they always had you put your two RAM right next to each other. Apparently that's not the case on the new models, and it makes sense. It's for heat distribution from what I can tell. So whereas I put, sorry, the dogs start barking during this portion of the thing, but long story short was to space your DDR5 on this motherboard, and you need to choose slots 2 and 4 if you're thinking of it left to right from the CPU standpoint. Okay, well that was something. So the old style, like I said, was where you put them right next to each other, I'm pretty sure. But the new style is to set them in, like, start at banks 2, and I did 1 and 2 when we watched the DDR5 being installed. I did slots 1 and 2, and it should have been 2 and 4. It just gives them extra space and lets them breathe. I think that was just a redesign that somebody came up with later. And now to the wiring. This is another thing that, so I end up, you can see how big of a pain it is to shove these wires into this small space. Ooh, like and subscribe. Remember to do that. I always talk like I'm talking to a lot of people, but currently my guess is no one is watching this. But I hope if, there's somebody who's building a computer for the first time, the fact that this is so thorough, maybe it'll help you. So I'm attaching, this is the ATX power supply, and there's a designated ATX spot on the back. So what I was going to say is this was a pain in the rear, and what I ended up doing was dismounting the power supply so that I could get better access to it, plugging everything in, and then wiring it back. And that seemed to do the trick. So now we're just wiring the components for the top of the tower into the main tower, like such as your power switch so you can turn your computer on and off, and then going through the prongs, and they're at the bottom right on this particular motherboard. And this is one of those things that you need to go pull out your manual, look through the spots, read everything that's going on there, because you can definitely install these in the wrong spots. And I'm not saying it could cause disaster, but I would hate for it to, because these components are not cheap, especially on this build. Well, depends who you are. Not cheap for me. So I wouldn't want to ruin any of these. So read it thoroughly and you should be good to go. Looks like, yep, I've got that installed. It looks pretty good. Be interesting if you could see where my hand was like getting cut up. Then you would know you're like, that was a bad idea. And it was. Okay.
I feel like people with really large
Hands
might not even be able to.
Yeah, I have what you call piano fingers or guitar fingers, so I got like skinny long fingers, so this is probably optimal for a small case and having to reach far in. And here we're looking at the diagram because I still was not quite sure, and I'm glad I did. And the finished product. So then I got it up and running, and it went well. So hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, but that's the extent of at least putting the build together and getting it started.